If the future really is electric, then Volkswagen's battery-powered E Golf is well placed to capitalise. Subtle styling hides impressive technology that's easy to use in ordinary motoring. With zero emissions come big savings, and there's a reasonable driving range between charges. Still want that turbo diesel family hatch?
One day, all electric motoring will be fully accepted, but not yet. Issues of range and price deter potential buyers, often frightened by the new technology and in need of familiarity and reassurance. The kind of thing offered by this all-electric model, the E Golf. Now this probably won't be most people's vision of milk float mobility, and it's easy to understand why. Before the launch of this model in the spring of 2014, electric motion was associated with a kind of extrovert, futuristic design you saw on cars like the Nissan Leaf and the BMW i3. Volkswagen could have done that too, but instead opted to try something far more challenging: the creation of an all-electric car that looked and felt identical to a conventional one. The 7th generation Golf was developed from the start with this goal in mind. Its unique Mqb platform, flexible enough to make this Volkswagen the first car available with no fewer than 5 different types of power source. The CNG compressed natural gas version isn't available here, but alongside this e-Golf, we also get a petrol-electric GTE plug-in hybrid model, as well as the conventional petrol and diesel versions. It's quite a lineup. Creating this version, though, challenged Volkswagen's designers more than any other. Its launch was the culmination of 38 years of development, the first electric Golf prototype dating all the way back to 1976. That car, though, only developed 25 PS and managed just 43 miles between charges. This one, of course, is very different. But will it be different enough to appeal beyond the limited eco-conscious market that's previously defined cars like this? Time to find out. I get behind the wheel, and it's no great surprise to find that this e-Golf's cabin and driving environment is as determinedly conventional as its exterior styling. In fact, if you've tried an ordinary Mark 7 model Golf before, the only real visible difference you'll find once inside this one lies with the substitution of the usual rev counter with this power display. Twist the conventional key to start things up, and the red needle on the gauge whirls round the dial before coming to rest first on the stop setting and then moving to the top 0 position. At the same time, there's a chime and a green ready message in the instrument cluster, helpful pointers to compensate for the fact that there's a lack of the normal oral sounds that would indicate a readiness for forward motion normally. You instigate this by snicking the familiar looking auto gear stick into drive, and it's time to do just that. Now, if you haven't tried an electric car before, your initial impression will probably be one of surprise at just how fast it initially feels. There's a reason for that, of course, namely that the electric powertrain's full 270 Newton meters of torque is delivered all instantly in a form that will nearly always momentarily overwhelm the front wheels, and this is very gentle indeed on the throttle. The 37 miles per hour mark flashes by in just 4.2 seconds, which is quicker than a Golf GTI hot hatch. But things calmed down considerably after that, with the 62 miles per hour benchmark finally being reached in 10.4 seconds, a sprint time that's very comparable to a 1.6 litre Golf Blue Motion diesel. The whole package is based around a 115 PS AC electric motor that drives the front wheels via a single-speed auto gearbox, with charge provided by a 24.2 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery, putting out 323 volts. This can be charged in 8 hours via the optional PodPoint wall box charger that almost all owners will want to install in their garages. Though if, when out and about, you're fortunate enough to come across one of the rapid charging stations that use powerful 40-watt DC chargers, then you'll be able to replenish 80% of your e-Golf's battery capacity in just 30 minutes. With reasonable battery capacity, of course, comes heavy curb weight, or at least it is so with the current affordable EV technology. That's certainly the case here, the e-Golf tipping the scales at 1,585 kilograms. That's 210 kilograms more than the equivalent version of the ordinary diesel model. This portliness is one of the reasons why the speed of this car becomes less and less arresting the faster you try to drive it, to the point where the lowly 87 miles per hour maximum makes this the slowest Golf since the 1970s when flat out. And that weightliness has an impact when it comes to handling too. Because of it, Volkswagen has had to fit stiffened, lowered suspension that causes the car to fidget over our country's typically terrible tarmac. Nor does this setup do anything to make this e-Golf feel keener through twisty corners that generally see the vehicle feeling a little out of sorts in comparison to the crisp handling you get from its fossil-fueled stablemates. There is an upside to this extra weight though, which primarily lies in the way that it's been centrally mounted in the floor of the car. Now that aids stability, reducing roll and improving corner turning that's further enhanced by direct electromechanical steering. Ultimately, of course, this is all of limited relevance in an all-electric family hatch of this kind that'll be used primarily for urban journeys and short trips, although they needn't be that short. Volkswagen claims a driving range of 118 miles in this car when fully charged, although to achieve that, you'd have to be progressing in a lethargic fashion that would probably severely irritate your fellow motorists. As with all this car's most direct battery-powered rivals, we've found that around 80 miles is a more realistically achievable range in real-world motoring, and even that is heavily dependent on judicious use of the various driving tools that Volkswagen provides to help you conserve every drop of precious charge. Essentially, these boil down to a couple of things: use of the 3 provided driving modes and the extent to which you exercise the effective regenerative braking system. We'll start with the driving modes. Moving off, e-Golf motoring always begins in the most powerful normal setting that delivers the performance figures I just quoted, but that's probably not going to provide you with the ultimate driving range figure you're looking for. Now, assistance in doing that comes with the press of this mode switch behind the gear stick that takes you into the eco setting that we've found ourselves using most of the time in this car. Yes, in eco guys, your e-Golf will go a bit slower. Total power output falls to 95 PS, torque is trimmed by 50 Newton meters, the output of the air conditioner is reduced, and the response curve of the throttle pedal is modified. To be honest though, on short journeys, you don't really notice the effect of all this too greatly, and the eco tweaks certainly help when it comes to preserving battery charge. If you want to go further, then another press of the modes button will take you into the final Eco Plus setting, which we'd only really recommend for city centre use. Here, the engine output falls to just 75 PS, the maximum speed is only 56 miles an hour, throttle response is negligible, and you don't get any air conditioning at all. To be fair, full fat power always returns if you use the kickdown, and given that, we would recommend that you use at least one of these modes for most of your driving. At the same time, to get the most from this car, you'll need to maximise the gains achievable through judicious use of regenerative braking, the system via which energy is harvested back to the battery as the vehicle slows and brakes. Again, it's something you have to proactively think to do. Simply start off with the auto gear lever and drive, and you'll hardly generate any regenerative energy at all. A state of affairs that'll be ideal for the rare times when you're cruising at higher speeds in the car and you want to preserve forward velocity when you come off the throttle. Otherwise though, you'll want to be maximising this e-Golf model's regenerative capabilities every time you're not accelerating. Snick the gear lever to the left and you can do this via D1, D2 and D3 settings that gradually increase the regenerative braking effect. It reaches its maximum if you snick the lever down into B. Here, the car slows so significantly when you come off the throttle that you'll find yourself rarely using the brake unless there's a need to come to a complete stop. Of course, there are other driving tools provided that'll also help. That power display instrument binnacle gauge I mentioned at the beginning, for example. It'll tell you when you're driving economically, which is when the needle is in the blue shaded area at the top right, and when electrical energy is being created by regenerative braking, when the needle's in the green shaded area in the top left. Plus, there are various e-displays available to you on the central fascia infotainment screen. A power flow graphic showing whether charge is being used or recuperated, a range monitor that shows how much driving range has been consumed, and the plus potential for adding back to it with more careful motoring, and a recuperation graph that demonstrates your success or otherwise in harvesting energy from that regenerative braking process I was describing earlier. Satisfying ownership of this car lies in mastering and getting the most from all these systems, something that becomes second nature surprisingly quickly. A different kind of driving satisfaction then, but enjoyable too, in its own way. These days, the choice you have to make in buying an affordable, family-sized all-electric car is fairly clear. Must you display your eco-consciousness overtly and buy, say, a BMW i3 or a Nissan Leaf? Or will you be content to keep your planet-saving preferences to yourself and drive something like this? A Golf that, well, looks just like any other Golf. Of course, there are differences. How could there not be? There's no need for an exhaust pipe for a start. And the prominent central Volkswagen roundel is tinged with the blue finishing that's used right around the car to reference its electric status. For the most part, though, changes over the standard model have been kept to the absolute minimum, a theme that continues here at the rear, where LED taillights and an aerodynamic rear spoiler mark out a tailgate style to continue the understatedly purposeful theme. The visual differences you do get are most noticeable here at the front, the most distinctive touch being these C-shaped lower LED daytime running lights that replace the conventional fog lamps. More LED technology is on display in the headlamps, and from each of these flows a signature blue strip that runs along a cosmetic radiator grille headlined by another blue-tinged Volkswagen badge. From the side, the familiar story continues with a profile that could only belong to Volkswagen's legendary family hatch. Distinct all-electric model touches are limited to these unique 16-inch Tilleve alloy wheels and an E Golf badge that begins the stronger of these two character lines. You have to have this battery-powered variant as a 5-door hatch, a body shape emphasising a design feature we particularly like in the Mark 7 model range, this tautly drawn C-pillar. It's supposed to represent the drawn string of a bow, giving the car an accelerative look, even when it's standing still. As ever, what's more important is the stuff you can't see. An e-Golf, of course, needs a much bigger battery than its GTE plug-in hybrid stablemate. So in partnership with Panasonic, Volkswagen has developed a 24.2 kWh lithium-ion unit for it, with 264 cells and 27 modules. Now that's slightly bigger than the battery you find in a Ford Focus Electric or a BMW i3, and slightly smaller than the unit you'd find in a rival Mercedes B-Class electric drive or Nissan Leaf. Either way though, it's a big thing to package into a compact family car. So it's fortunate that the Mqb modular transverse matrix platform that this 7th generation Golf range is based upon was designed to allow for it. As a result, the reinforced frame that the hefty 318 kilogram battery pack sits in can be stowed in the spine of the car beneath the front and rear seats, rather than being stuck at the back where it would affect weight distribution and eat into boot space. Now, perfecting this mechanical layout and delivering it in a form that could roll down the same production line as any other Golf model must have taken years of painstaking development. But very little of that is obvious from a seat behind the wheel, where again, conventionality reigns. As with the exterior, the message here is very clear. Yes, this car is electrically powered, but otherwise it's just like any other Golf. Carry on as usual. The only real area of complication lies in the clearly presented instrument binnacle that you view through the 3-spoke multifunction steering wheel. Although the speedometer dial on the right is familiar, the power display on the left that replaces a conventional rev counter isn't. It includes a tiny power available gauge at the bottom, but the main part of the dial is there to cover 2 key areas of feedback. It'll tell you when you're driving economically, which is when the needle is in the blue shaded area at the top right, and when electrical energy is being created by regenerative braking, when the needle is in the green shaded area at the top left. A multifunction screen between the binnacle's two main dials shows your remaining range, as well as bringing all the various infotainment functions directly into your line of vision with neat carousel-style graphics. These features are more easily accessed via the Discover Navigation Pro central infotainment screen, an 8-inch touch-sensitive display that dominates the centre of the dash. It includes an e-manager, which allows you to preset charging times, but in practice, we think you probably prefer to do that on your smartphone using the CarNet e-remote control services app that comes with the car, a system that will also allow you to check your vehicle's status and even pre-warm or pre-cool the interior prior to a journey. This central fascia screen also includes a range of so-called e-displays, one of them a beautifully detailed power flow graphic. In addition, you get a range monitor showing more clearly how far you can drive on electric power, and there's also a graphical regeneration screen charting for you how much of your charge used on your journey has been created by regenerative braking. Also helpful is a driving data section that gives you useful long-term, since start and since charging trip computer statistics. Even the 3D satellite navigation setup is battery orientated, always ready to guide you to the nearest charging station. Of course, this touchscreen isn't only there to illustrate all-electric functionality. As you'd expect, there are all the usual audio and Bluetooth phone functions, along with Volkswagen's CarNet Guide and Inform setup that tells you everything from traffic news to weather and news feeds. Plus, the brand's standard CarNet App Connect package allows owners of Apple and Android smartphone handsets to use the Apple CarPlay, Android Auto and MirrorLink systems that enable you to duplicate the functionality of your phone on this colour touchscreen. Away from technology, the build quality and design is almost faultless, as it usually is on a Golf. In terms of trim, the only reference to this model's unique status is found in the blue stitching applied to the leather used around the steering wheel and the auto gear selector. In front of that lever is an E Golf badged covered storage box, including USB and aux in points, while behind the transmission stick lies a coin tray and two cup holders that can be covered with a sliding top. There's also a storage box between the seats with a height adjustable top, a cooled glove box, a ceiling mounted sunglasses storage area and reasonably sized door bins. Let's move rearwards and try the back seat, space around which doesn't appear to have been compromised by the large battery pack that must sit beneath. As with any normal 5-door Golf, there's decent leg and knee room for this class of car, thanks to the 53mm wheelbase increase delivered by that high-tech Mqb platform I was talking about earlier. Shoulder and elbow room are also both quite reasonable, and the headroom's quite adequate. The result is the usual spatial compromise you get in this class of car, so comfortable room for 2 adults or 3 kids, but nothing more. Things would be better were it not for the kind of high central transmission tunnel you'd think you wouldn't need on an all-electric front-wheel drive car. 2 cup holders are also provided in this fold-down centre armrest. Most all-electric cars, though, manage to achieve decent rear seat packaging without too many compromises. Where a lot of them struggle, though, is when it comes to boot space. After all, the bulky battery cells have got to sit somewhere. Here, fortunately, the effect of that has been minimal, and certainly a lot more minimal than it is with a Golf GT plug-in hybrid, where boot space falls from the 380-litre figure you get in a normal model to just 272 litres, less than is offered by the brand's Polo Super Mini. With an e-Golf, there are far fewer sacrifices to be made in this regard. Boot space here falls only slightly against the standard version to 341 litres, which is actually the same as you get in a Golf R hot hatch, and significantly more than you get in direct rivals like BMW's i3 and the Ford Focus Electric. There's no room for anything like a temporary spare wheel though, deletion of which frees up space beneath the boot floor for this shallow area where the charging leads sit. There's also a 12-volt socket, bag hooks and the usual tie-down points. Plus, to make up for the slight packaging deficiency, a ski hatch is thoughtfully provided so you can poke longer items through into the cabin. Pushing forward the backrest, doesn't reveal a completely flat floor, but there is enough space to compensate for the fact that Volkswagen doesn't offer an estate version of this variant, the total figure being 1,231 litres. Volkswagen has tried to make everything about owning this e-Golf as straightforward as it can be, including buying it. So there are none of the complicated options you get with the rival Nissan Leaf that see you having to choose between either buying the car complete or buying it without a battery and then separately leasing that battery over an agreed ownership period. No, you buy an e-Golf as you would buy any other more conventional Volkswagen model, or almost as you would anyway. Unfortunately, you can't buy this all-electric model from just any Volkswagen dealer. It's only available from the marque's small UK network of EV specialists. Now, at the time of making this film, spring 2016, there were 26 of these spread around the country, geographically chosen, the brand claims, to ensure that wherever you live, there'll be one within 50 miles of your location. The other difference when it comes to e-Golf purchase is that, very helpfully, the government will reward your eco-centric choice by throwing in some money towards the cost, which is just as well, given that otherwise the rather off-putting asking price of this model would be nearly £32,000. As it is, a £4,500 government-funded PICG plug-in car grant reduces that to around £27,000 for the single-spec and single-body style 5-door model on offer. So, is that enough to make Volkswagen's all-electric family car comparable in price to its diesel equivalent? Well, yes, just about, provided your comparisons are realistic. The brand's most frugal diesel variant, the Golf Blue Motion, would save you around £5,000, but that car only comes with a manual gearbox and much lower levels of performance and specification. No satellite navigation, for example. For a more realistic comparison, you really ought to be pitching this car up against a 5-door Golf derivative that's more powerful, equivalently specified, and fitted with automatic transmission. Say a 2-litre TDI 150 PS DSG model in mid-range GT spec with navigation included. Do that and you'll actually end up paying slightly more for that diesel derivative than you would for an e-Golf. Now, as you're probably aware, Volkswagen also offers a plug-in petrol-electric hybrid version of this car, badged the GTE, that matches battery power with a petrol engine for greater range. Now, bear in mind two things here, though. First, the Golf GTE only has 31 miles of all-electric range, around a quarter of what you get here. And second, that a GTE costs significantly more and doesn't get such a large government grant to help reduce its asking price. A comparable Golf GTE NAV model costs nearly £36,000 and qualifies for a plug-in car grant of £2,500, equating to a final asking price of just over £33,000, so nearly £6,000 more than an e-Golf. Given that many buyers will be buying their model of this sort as a second car anyway, and so will have another vehicle if they ever need to go further afield, this e-Golf will often make more sense. Or at least it will, provided family-sized space is needed. Volkswagen also offers an all-electric 5-door version of its Up city car, pricing it at around £20,000 after subtraction of that government grant. So much for the Volkswagen options. What about other brands and the alternatives they offer? Well, e-Golf Money will deliver for you various petrol-electric hybrid options. A well-specified Toyota Prius would cost much the same as this car, for example. Plus, there are a small selection of plug-in hybrid models available for not much more than the kind of cash that's being asked here. Although those are really targeted by the Golf GTE derivative I was just talking about. Here, it's rather more relevant to concentrate on this e-Golf's directly comparable all-electric rivals. Now, buyers looking at these and needing a car for family travel can immediately discount the models that are available from Peugeot, from Citroën and from Mitsubishi, because they're all based on little city cars. At the opposite end of the spectrum, all-electric specialists Tesla are still only represented in the exclusive luxury segment. And that leaves 4 other options directly comparable to an e-Golf, all of them comparably priced against this Wolfsburg-branded contender. Now, 2 of them are conventional looking, the Ford Focus Electric and the Mercedes B-Class Electric Drive, and 2 are rather more futuristically styled, the Nissan Leaf and the BMW i3. We'd discount the Ford. It's got a much smaller boot and its slightly less powerful battery gives you less performance and a driving range that at around 100 miles is the most restricted in the segment. The Mercedes is a better option, but it's a 5-seat MPV, so looks frumpier than an e-Golf and isn't as enjoyable to drive. Now that isn't the problem that afflicts BMW's i3. It's the most involving car in the class around the bends. But handling won't be a priority for typical buyers in this sector, people who may be a touch disappointed by the BMW's restricted rear seat and luggage area space. These people would be better off going for a Nissan Leaf, a good all-round package that will save you just over £2,000 on an e-Golf. It doesn't have the same quality, look and feel as this Volkswagen though. Plus there's a futuristic look to that car that not everyone will like. Now, if, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is an e-Golf that you really want, well, then you're going to need to know just how generous Volkswagen has been with the standard spec. And the answer is that actually this car comes very well equipped indeed. You get these 16-inch Tilleve alloy wheels shod with low rolling resistance tyres, plus there are front and rear parking sensors, an alarm, range-adjustable LED headlamps, LED tail lights and unique C-signature LED daytime running lights that take the place of front fog lamps. Inside there's 2-zone climate control that also cools the glove box, auto headlamps and wipers, a cruise control with a speed limiter, plus smart blue stitching for the leather on the gear stick and on the multifunction steering wheel. More importantly, all e-Golf buyers get Volkswagen's top-spec Discover Navigation Pro infotainment system with its 8-inch screen offering 3D mapping, speed limit display, Bluetooth telephony, voice activation, the usual informational functions, SD card and USB connectivity, and the DAB tuner as part of an 8-speaker stereo system. There's also an e-manager screen that allows you to preset charging cycles to take advantage of off-peak electricity. And that's something you can also do remotely via a CarNet e-remote mobile services app. Just download that onto your smartphone. You get a 3-year subscription to this and 2 other CarNet services as part of the standard spec. Now, the first of these is the brand's clever CarNet Guide and Inform setup that gives you in-car online access to a whole range of useful journeying information. Everything from traffic news, weather and news feeds to information on fuel and parking prices in your place of destination. In addition, there's the CarNet App Connect package. It allows owners of Apple and Android smartphone handsets to use the Apple CarPlay, Android Auto and MirrorLink systems. That means you can duplicate the functionality of your phone onto the dashboard infotainment display and access selected apps in car. On to options. Now for us, the key one is a heat pump, essentially an add-on module to the electric heating and air conditioning system. Now this draws heat from both ambient air and the vehicle's drive systems, using it to significantly reduce electricity consumption, especially in winter. Otherwise, well, there really isn't too much else you're going to need. You might want the advanced telephone connection package that gives your device a bespoke storage compartment in the front center armrest that automatically connects the handset through to the vehicle's aerial for improved reception. Go for this option and you'll also be able to specify the climate windscreen that accelerates defrosting at startup and prevents fogging in winter while keeping the cabin cool in summer. Other extra cost features include metallic paint, full Vienna leather upholstery, keyless entry and start system, subtle ambient lighting, headlamp washers, heated front seats, and a tempting 400-watt Dyne Audio sound pack that gives you a 10-channel digital amplifier and 8 speakers. There's the tinted glass and carpet mats that really should have been included as standard in a car of this price. And parking could be made easier if you specify a rear view camera and the park assist system that'll automatically steer you into the tightest spaces. On to the safety tally, which is very complete indeed. The ACC Adaptive Cruise Control System uses radar technology to automatically keep you a safe distance from the car in front on the highway, and uses the same technology for a front assist system that at speed scans the road ahead as you drive for potential accident hazards, warning you if one's detected and automatically braking if necessary. You get that same kind of functionality at urban speeds as part of a city emergency braking system. Plus, there's pre-crash preventative occupant protection that pre-tensions the seatbelts and automatically shuts the windows if the vehicle's electronics deem an accident to be inevitable. And a clever automatic post-collision braking system that automatically brakes the car down to 6 miles an hour after a collision. So if, say, someone hits you and understandably you go to pieces, the car will automatically sort itself out. More conventional safety kit runs to a driver alert system that monitors your driving reactions for drowsiness. If lethargy is detected, then you'll be prompted to stop for a restorative coffee. As you'd expect on a car of this price, you also get ISOFIX child seat fastenings, tyre pressure monitoring, and the usual electronic assistance for braking, traction and stability control. There's also 7 airbags, including a driver's knee bag, with rear side bags available at extra cost. If you want more safety peace of mind, then there's the option of looking at 2 key additional features. Lane Assist warns you if you're drifting out of your lane on the highway, and High Beam Assist automatically dips your headlights for you at night. As with any electric car, the savings you make will depend on how you drive it. Nor do we only mean the necessity of using the throttle with restraint, although obviously if you do that and keep the power display needle in the blue low energy consumption segment of the gauge, then that will help. As with any sophisticated electronic device, you'll get the best results by working with its functionality, primarily by understanding the various driving modes on offer and making the most of the regenerative braking system that helps recover back some of the energy that you'll be using as part of forward motion. I wouldn't blame you for worrying that all of that sounds rather complicated. We thought so too before we started driving the car. It really does, though, only take a few minutes to gain mastery of the brave new world of electronic mobility. The car automatically starts off in its full power normal mode, but once you locate and activate this rather hidden driving mode switch behind the gear stick, 2 other settings become available, which help a lot in maximising your range between charges. Most of the time, we've found ourselves using Eco, which instigates a package of efficiency tweaks that keep charge usage in check without too painful an effect on performance. Here, total power output falls from 115 to 95 PS, torque is trimmed from 270 to 220 Newton meters, the output of the air conditioner is reduced, and the response curve of the throttle pedal is modified. If you really want to don a hair shirt and go further, then the final profile is Eco Plus, although here the power output falls to 75 PS, the maximum speed is just 56 miles an hour, throttle response is negligible unless you use a kickdown, and you don't get any air conditioning at all. It's okay for stop-start city traffic as long as the day's not too hot, but otherwise we'd prefer to stay in Eco and maximise the gains achievable through judicious use of regenerative braking. Ah yes, the black art of recuperating precious driving range through regenerative braking. The system via which energy is harvested back to the battery as the vehicle slows and brakes. Actually, it's not such a black art at all, or at least it isn't in this E Golf, where manipulating the process has been made pretty much as simple as it can be. You start off in the auto gear lever's D setting with no regenerative braking at all, but repeatedly pushing the stick to the left scrolls you through D1, D2 and D3 settings that gradually increase the effect. It reaches its maximum if you snick the lever down into B. Here, the car slows so significantly when you come off the throttle that you find yourself rarely using the brake at all unless there's a need to come to a complete stop. The extent to which you master all of this will determine just how close you get to maximising the operating range of this car between charges. Volkswagen quote this as being 118 miles, exactly the same as a rival all-electric BMW i3, but around 37 miles less than a rival Nissan Leaf. Don't get too hung up on these figures though, they're all hopelessly optimistic. In our experience, in real-world use, you don't get much more than around 80 miles between charges with any of the cars in this class, and even that reading will come under attack in winter when the cabin heater will be drawing more from the battery charge. With the E Golf, you can minimise that effect by specifying an optional heat pump. This warms the cabin primarily through heat drawn from both ambient air and the vehicle's drive systems, something that Volkswagen says can improve your operating range by up to 20% in cold weather. Get all of this right and the savings can really start to stack up. A diesel-powered Golf would probably cost a typical user around 11 pence per mile to run. Effectively used, an e-Golf could potentially drop that figure to around 3 pence per mile. Even if annually you only covered around 10,000 miles a year, that still computes to an electric versus diesel annual saving of around £800. And before you ask, yes, that does take into account the increased electricity charges you would incur with this electric Volkswagen. The brand reckons that it would cost about £3.10 to fully charge an e-Golf from empty, and that's based on an electricity price of just under 13 pence per kilowatt hour. So if you charged your e-Golf 3 times a week, it would still cost under £500 to charge it for the whole year. Overall, we reckon that the daily charging process will probably add about £35 onto the monthly electricity bill of a typical regular user. But you can reduce that by setting the car's integrated charging timer to draw its power from the national grid at off-peak rates. You do that either by using the eManager display on the fascia infotainment screen or by using the CarNet eRemote Mobile Services app that Volkswagen will give you for your smartphone. Either way, you'll be incurring a total charging cost that most owners will be happy to pay to offset the average monthly £145 outlay that they would otherwise have spent fueling an equivalent petrol or electric motor. Now, if you're new to the whole electric motoring scene, the physical part of the charging process might seem a little daunting, something that isn't helped by the industry's failure to agree upon a common plug type or recharge lead length. Again, though, Volkswagen has done its best to simplify the process here. As standard, you're provided with 2 bright yellow leads, one for plugging into a conventional domestic main socket, the other for all your other charging needs. Recharging the Panasonic 24.2 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery will take around 13 hours when your car is connected to a normal 230-volt household socket, but you can reduce that figure to a more acceptable 8 hours if, as almost all e-Golf owners will, you pay your Volkswagen EV dealer just under £400 more to get your garage fitted with an optional PodPoint wall box charger, which uses an uprated 3.6 kilowatt supply. A third option comes into play if, on your travels, you're fortunate enough to find a really powerful 40 kilowatt DC charger. With this, the car can use its integrated CCS combined charging system to replenish 80% of its battery capacity in just 30 minutes. If and when these quick chargers are more freely available in garages and motorway service stations across the land, long trips in electric vehicles like this one will become quite manageable. Even as it is, this e-Golf takes a lot of the sweat out of the range anxiety you typically get with a car of this kind. Power off when you're out and about, and the infotainment screen on the fascia will tell you how much battery charge you've used and your remaining range. Return to the car again after an outward journey and the same display will advise you on whether you can get home with what remains, and if not, offer to direct you to a range of local charging points. You'll be pleased to find that the navigation system is always ready to do that, although unfortunately no information is ever given about the available charging formats at the stations concerned. Ideally though, of course, you'll be doing most of your charging at home, something that should be possible if you manage your driving carefully. Another way to do that lies in keeping a close eye on the Discover Navigation Pro infotainment system's various e-displays, there to allow you to really get involved with the whole process on the move. There's a neat real-time power flow screen showing whether charge is being used or recuperated, a range monitor that shows you how much driving range has been consumed and the plus potential for adding back to it with more careful motoring, and a recuperation graph that demonstrates your success or otherwise in harvesting energy from the regenerative braking process that I was describing earlier. Even when you leave your e-Golf, you can still oversee its functionality on your smartphone via that CarNet eRemote Mobile Services app I mentioned earlier. Now this gives you trip and vehicle status statistics and even allows you to preheat or pre-cool the cabin prior to your next journey. In short, all the tools are here to enable you to move into a new kind of driving regime, and it would be a pity to own this car and not fully embrace it. As part of that, you quickly learn to sort out your own personal approach to charging your e-Golf, with setting the e-manager to plug in efficiently at night or topping up the battery at a public point when you go shopping becoming second nature tasks. To use a public charging point, you'll need to get yourself a swipe card from your local council, which may or may not include the parking fee and the electricity you'll be using. Get all of this right and you'll open up the opportunity of a whole range of potential savings that go far beyond merely the money you won't have to shell out on fuel. The most significant of these lies in the fact that, like its all-electric rivals, this e-Golf attracts absolutely no benefit-in-kind company car tax, potentially saving owners thousands every year. Let's say, for example, you switch to this car after running a Golf 2-litre TDI diesel automatic. Were you to do this, you'd find just over £300 extra in your pay packet every month. It'd be like being given a £3,600 annual rise. Actually, no, it'd be better than that because you wouldn't have to pay annual road tax, your maintenance costs will be about 15% lower, fewer moving parts, you see. You'd be exempt from the London congestion charge, and in some cities, you wouldn't even have to pay for parking. But what about the environmental issues? After all, some in the green lobby get very angry about the whole pure electric car, zero emissions ethos. They reckon that ignores the well-to-wheel demands of supplying the electricity that powers cars of this kind. Well, we'd respond by pointing out that these people usually completely overlook the fact that CO2 figures for conventional cars fail to take into account the logistical cost of getting the fuel to the pump. Still, if you are one of those enviro-conscious folk, we'll tell you that the independent calculations suggest that the burden of filling your batteries in this car will result in a theoretical 54 grams per kilometre of CO2 being released into the atmosphere, based on typical use of the UK's energy grid. Which means that an e-Golf driver will still be having nearly half the environmental impact of a compact petrol-electric family hatch like Toyota's Prius. Or you can bypass the argument entirely by switching your home to a renewable energy supplier like Ecotricity, which supplies its power from a fleet of wind and sun parks. And that will please your green-bearded friends. What else? Well, the car gets the usual Volkswagen 3-year, 60,000 mile warranty, and the battery gets its own 8-year, 100,000 mile warranty. As for battery longevity, well, after around 10 years of use, it's true that you can expect your e-Golf's batteries to be down to around 80% of their original charge potential. But by that time, most owners would have long ago traded their car in for another. This may affect resale values though not as much as the current market's nervousness when it comes to all-electric cars of this kind. A typical diesel Golf's 40% residual value after 3 years and 60,000 miles will be reduced to not much more than around 25% here. Some compensation comes with this e-Golf model's extremely affordable insurance rating of 15E. By comparison, an all-electric BMW i3 is rated at Group 21E and a Nissan Leaf is Group 22E. While if you were going to go for the plug-in petrol-electric Golf GTE, you'd be looking at Group 26E. Service intervals follow Volkswagen's fixed service regime. Here the first service is required after 2 years or 20,000 miles and thereafter every year or 20,000 miles. Until all-electric vehicles can offer much greater range than affordable battery technology makes possible at present, then sales potential in this category will always be limited. As Tesla has shown, though, that time may be close at hand. Make no mistake, as the years go by, we'll all be running out of reasons not to make electric power our primary means of automotive propulsion. In the here and now, though, how does this e-Golf stack up? Well, it certainly plays down its eco-conscious credentials, something we think a lot of potential buyers will like. Even driving range needn't be an especially significant barrier to ownership. It certainly isn't the issue the motoring press have cracked it up to be. I mean, do they seriously think that anyone able to afford to spend this kind of money on a car of this sort will hail from a single car household? Of course not. Likely buyers will be considering this as a second or maybe even a third vehicle for short run use. We'll wager though that once they get in the driveway, they'll be using it for 80% of the time. Of course, not everyone will like the thought of e-Golf motoring. Those without a garage will join single car families and long distance commuters in dismissing it out of hand. Those people, though, aren't folk who would ever have considered a model like this in the first place. No, all-electric motoring still suits a small but distinct demographic of forward-thinking families and low-mileage company users, a market niche that's widening all the time thanks to the introduction of more accessible products like this one. In summary, perhaps more than any other car of its kind, this Volkswagen proves just how easy and seamless the transition from fossil fuel to battery power can be. The future, it seems, might look and feel more familiar than we thought.